Hi guys, and welcome back. And today we'll get on with having a look at how to sculpt a 1/35th scale Fallschirmjagger. Now I have to confess I wasn't planning to do this video. I was working diligently on the dio base for the first encounter diorama, but I got somewhat distracted by 3D printing and what I sort of had long range plans for that. So let's have a look at that. So I was lucky enough to get a 3D printer and any cubic photon 2, which is a resin printer, for Christmas. And part of that is, aside from making scenery, boxes and stowage and all that sort of stuff, I had this desire to be able to build my own figures. So I've been scouring sites, and this is a great site called Desktop Hero, and it's one of at least 3 that I've found that allow you to pose and theoretically dress a miniature figurine. Now, I think typically they're designed for 28mm wargaming, so there's some issues with scaling them up, which you'll see some unsuccessful attempts that eventually got me to a semi-successful attempt. But we'll just have a quick look at how this operates, and then we'll get into it. So it's an online application. There's a website, effectively, and it will populate with a default figure when you go in, and you can scroll around, and it's fully 3D. And then you can pick from a menu of alternate figures and poses, and it will build those up for you. And again, you can scroll around and see those from all angles. Now I've got some saved characters because I've been rooting around in this for a few weeks now, and this is sort of my experimental default man, and he is naked except for a pair of shorts, which I think they require for modesty that shorts are on, because you can't remove them like the rest of the clothing, although there are no genitalia, so I don't know what it's hiding. But you can, as you can see here, you can activate the bones, and this is what I really love about this. It's quite simple and you can see what you're doing, and that allows you to pose the figure into virtually any position that you desire. And that means, for me, because dioramas are all about storytelling, you potentially, if you can sculpt, you can form an armature through resin of a figure in any pose. Now, I'll show you some attempts at upsizing figures that were posed and clothed through this and some of the other ones. And because they're sort of for wargaming figures, they tend to be that sort of heroic wargaming figure size. So when you upscale them, they're actually quite massive proportionally in the chest and the arms and things like that. So this guy here is the result of a number of days of trial and error of scaling down, but scaling proportionally to get what I can have as a basic armature that I can put into any pose. And then the thinking is that I'll just be able to then add polymer clay to put uniforms on. So that's the plan. Very easy to use. You can swap out all sorts of weaponry and things like that. And yeah, so far it seems to be working. So this is one of the first figures I tried, and this is a Haladonian Ranger, a recon squad member. And this is sort of part of a little vignette I want to produce, but again, a little bit too chunky for my liking, and straight out of the STL file which you download. Now, this is from a different website, Hero Forge, and they tend to be a little bit more heroic in their overall proportions and a little bit harder to scale down. This is a second attempt where I've tried to thin him down a little bit, but wasn't necessarily hitting the mark. And you can also see things like some of the equipment is way oversized. And I get that because it's for a wargaming table, so people want to be able to pick up stuff like that from a distance. So the challenge was trying to scale it down appropriately. So there's the first and second attempts together, and neither of them really useful. Third attempt, which was getting a little bit closer to the money, but I wasn't happy with the weaponry and the equipment. So this is where I started to form the opinion that I'd have to just produce an armature, because I would want to be able to use things like normal 1/35 scale equipment packs from Tamiya or Masterbox or the like, and so that needed to fit in with the overall scale of the figure. This was my attempt at a really slimmed down version, but he looks a little bit under the weather and a bit malnutrition. So at that stage I thought, all right, I'm just going to produce an armature, and here's one of the early goes, which was sort of half right. I got the back half right, so but you see the front half is completely flat, so he might be a good casualty further down the line. I won't try and turn this into a 3D printing tutorial because I've been learning by trial and error, and I'd say the error rate is about 70% error and 30% success at this stage, but it's slowly starting to get a little bit more consistent as I learn more about how to set the printer up, and it's a little bit more involved than I imagined it might have been. Then we started to get closer to the armature man, but this guy is still a little bit out of whack, and you can see that he has got a massive left hand, which is well out of scale. So that needed to go back to the drawing board. And now you can see I've given him a pygmy left forearm and left hand. So a lot of it is trial and error because it's hard to get the magnitude of the figure in the 3D design material, but he's very too thin. And also the back of his bonce is as flat as a pancake. So perseverance, and I ended up with these two guys. So one's just the green transparent resin is supposed to be a higher quality resin, because I was trying to get decent detail from the face, but wasn't happy with that anyway, and wasn't too distraught about that because I always sort of felt I'd use Hornet heads anyway because they're fantastic and I love them, and they've got such a huge range for having characters from all sorts of different armies. So I was pretty happy with the proportions for these guys. They're a little bit under scale of a normal 1/35th figure, but that's deliberate because I decided I'd use polymer clay to build up the uniforms because I think it just behaves itself better than the two-part epoxy putties, which get really sticky and actually don't hold a lot of detail unless you're sort of running close to the curing time. And the other thing is too, you're restricted by the curing time. You've got a lump of putty, you have to use it or it goes hard and dies. The polymer stuff doesn't go hard until you bake it. So it felt like that was the way to go. So that was a very abridged version of the 3D printing trials and tribulations, but we have got a basic figure. It can be refined, but it's not too far off the money. So next we'll have a look at the actual sculpting. So the sculpting was an interesting process. I've never used the polymer clay before to do this, but I've seen a lot of videos and it looked like it was the right way to go. And it was accidental. I just thought, first of all, I'll try and do a boot while I'm waiting for the DAS clay to dry on the big dio base. And the boot was sort of like, oh, I'm not unhappy with that. So I went on to do the pants. And in the back of my mind had always been the fact that there should be a couple of captured Fallschirmjaggers in the scene. And I didn't like any of the figures that I could buy commercially, so I thought, I'll have a crack and see how it comes out, but with no great expectations. So I apologise, I didn't film any of this. I just sort of took reference pictures for myself along the way, and as you can see, starting to develop a bit of a technique, so marking where I wanted the jump smock to cover, and whacked the little Tamiya head with the side cap in, which I thought would suit very nicely. Of course, then there was a mild disaster as I put the smock on the guy and then popped him in the oven to bake it, to firm it up, because one of the things I've learned is stage by stage, you just bake it to firm it up so you're not messing up the previous parts. And of course, I forgot to take the plastic head off, and this sort of thing happened. Perhaps not as graphic as that, but when he came out, his head was a blob. So that's him before I incinerated him, and with the bit of the jacket coming on, and getting some rough details. Again, starting to learn how to use it, and not trying to do everything at once, just doing it in stages. So it's a good pick up and put down project, because the clay doesn't dry up while you're in the put down stage, which I find very convenient. So baked that, and then started to get a little bit of detail in on the collars and the front sort of zipper part, and just getting the seam around the bottom of the jump smock as well. And then I thought I'd 3D design the belt buckle, and that was incredibly tiny and had about 6 cracks at it because I was making it too thin and none of the details were coming through. The details haven't come through as I envisaged them, but that's sort of what it's supposed to represent. And look at the distance with my Gumby eyes, it doesn't look too bad. So a little bit more detail now with the webbing going on and fixing up the pants down the bottom. One of the downsides of using the clear resin figure was when you bake it, the clear resin bubbles underneath the polymer clay, so it was causing bits to break off. So next time around I'll use just the plain grey one. So he's taking shape now, and I've put a hornet head on him and decided he'd be a wounded Fallschirmjagger, and a little bit more refined on the second boot. So picking up technique as I go along, made some tiny little metal strap webbing buckles, if you like, which were I think came out really well actually, and very easy to put into the figure. So quite happy with those. It's a sort of stylized version of the belt buckle. So that was sadly about as much as I'd captured in the still photos as I went along. But we'll get on with the painting, and I think one of the things I liked about the painting was as soon as I put the primer on, it started to look like a proper figure. So the painting is very straightforward. I won't bore you with me talking all over it. A little bit of music, and then we'll come back for the final reveal. And so that's pretty much it. Finished him off with a bit of a dusting with the pastel chalks, and he's good to go. So pretty happy with him. A couple of spins around on the magic spinning wheel. I mean, for my first attempt, I'm not ashamed of him, and I think he will go into the first encounter dio, probably towards the back and not necessarily the first thing you'll see. But I don't think he looks horrid. He has got a rather large left upper arm, and that was partly caused by the clear resin bubbling severely in that area. And I shaved it down as much as I could, but had to put more polymer clay in, and it is actually quite ridiculous. Unless he's self-gratifying with his left hand, there's no reason why his arm should be that large. So look, I can improve as we go along. So have a look at the last minute or so of this, and then some still pictures, and I'll come back and say goodbye. So that's pretty much it. And here he is up on the shelf with the 3 Dutch guys that I did a little while ago. And I think he sort of fits in. I think he holds his own reasonably well. So anyway, as I said, it was all unplanned, and I certainly learned a lot through the process, and I'm looking forward to doing some more figures and in some more dynamic poses than this. So sorry it delayed the Diobase video, which should have been out by now, but I'll be going straight back to working on it. Here it is, a bit of a sneak preview now. So it's a bigger base than I've worked on before, and I'm just in the process of doing the cobblestones, which the whole thing will be covered with cobblestones, and then the buildings around the edges. So as always, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. It wasn't planned, but it is the forerunner for similar sculpting videos with actual footage. So if you like this video, hit the thumbs up and share. Subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and ding the donger. And of course, leave a comment because I love reading them. Cheers!